Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to my web components crash course. So front-end web development is a pretty congested area of technologies. We have all types of frameworks and libraries and tools, but one common theme is delivering high-quality user interfaces with encapsulated components. So when you use a framework like React or Vue or Angular or just about any other front-end framework, you break everything up into components, everything in your UI, whether it's a search bar, a header, a blog post, whatever it might be. Well, we can actually do something similar without even using a framework and without the risk of it becoming obsolete, and that's by using web components. So in this crash course, we'll talk about what web components are. We're going to look at a couple slides, and then we'll jump in and I'll give you an example on how to create a web component from scratch. We're going to create a user card web component. So let's talk about what web components are. They're essentially a set of web platform APIs that allow us to create custom, reusable, and encapsulated HTML tags that we can use in web pages and web apps. So if you've ever used a front-end framework, again, like React or Vue, one of the main advantages is having an organized UI of components. If you have a header component, that includes the markup or the output. It includes the styling and any JavaScript functionality that comes with it, and you can simply embed it on the page. So web components work in a similar way, and we don't need to install any kind of third-party framework or library or anything like that. It can all be done with vanilla JavaScript. But of course, you can easily integrate web components with something like React if you want to. Now, there's three main building blocks when it comes to web components. We have custom elements, the shadow DOM, and HTML templates. So these all work together. You can use them individually, but for the most part, when you create web components, you're going to be using all three. So I just want to go over all three and just kind of explain what they are. So first off, custom elements, they give us the capability to create our own custom HTML tags. Just like you have a header tag, footer, paragraph, we can create completely custom tags as well. We can actually extend HTML tags as well. So this is done by creating a class within our JavaScript that extends this HTML element. You can also extend existing elements like, say, HTML paragraph element, but we're not going to really get into that. We're going to create our own custom ones. So this is an example, this app drawer class. And the way that we basically bind this to a custom tag like this is by using this custom elements.define and then whatever we want to call the tag. Okay, the convention is a hyphen, so if you want to have any, if you want separate words like this, you want to use a hyphen and then just connect it to our class. And this class can have a constructor with lifecycle methods as well. So I just want to quickly go over some of those lifecycle methods that are available to us. So we have a constructor, which is very common in object-oriented programming. It's basically called right away whenever there's an instance of the element that is created or upgraded. And in the constructor, you would do things like initialize any state you have, event listeners, things like that. And then we have connected callback, which is called every time the element is inserted into the DOM, and then disconnected callback is called every time it's removed from the DOM. So if you want to remove any event listeners or anything, you would do it here. We also have attribute changed callback, which takes in whatever the attribute name is, the old value and the new value. So this is called when an attribute is either added, removed, updated, or replaced. Because when we have a custom tag or a custom element, we can actually pass in custom attributes, much like we would props in something like React. So the shadow DOM it's basically self-containment. It allows us to encapsulate all of our markup and our styles in our custom element. So it's basically its own entity apart from the regular DOM, the document object model. So the styling is separate from the global CSS of the web page. So if we have like an H3 inside of our web component and we have it styled a certain way, that style is going to stick. And if there's any global styles on the web page, it's not going to affect our H3 or whatever element that we're talking about. Okay, so we have scope styles. We create the shadow DOM inside of the class by using whatever our custom element is and then using this attach shadow method. And for the most part, we add this mode open so that we have access to the shadow DOM within, for instance, our Chrome dev tools or whatever browser dev tools you're using. And this creates what's called a shadow root that we can actually reference throughout our class and we can interact with. All right, and if this sounds confusing, don't worry about it. I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. So we also have HTML templates. This is how we define the encapsulated markup of our web component on page load. The template tag allows us to store some markup on the page. You can later clone and reuse. So we can include both HTML and CSS in our template. We can also make use of something called slots, which allow us to make the template dynamic and add output to it or add custom text to it. Okay, so now, I mean, that's it for the slide. So I want to jump in and just show you what makes up a web component. We're going to look at creating custom elements, the shadow DOM, and HTML templates. Okay, so we're going to start working with web components. What I have here is just an index.html and a usercard.js. The usercard.js is completely empty, and in the index.html I just have some basic markup. I have an h3 and then a script with the source of usercard.js. So what I would like to do here is create a usercard web component. So I want to be able to actually have usercard like this. Okay, and have that output whatever I want, really. In this case, it's going to be an avatar, a user image, a name, a phone, an email, and also a button to show and hide the phone and email. Okay, so just so I can give you an example of having an event and some interactivity. So let's go ahead and save this. And obviously nothing is going to happen here. I mean, this is not an actual HTML tag. So we want to go into our usercard.js, and the first thing that we want to do here is create a class. Okay, just like I showed you in the slides. So we're going to call this usercard, and we want to make sure we extend HTML element. Okay, so what we're doing here is creating a custom element. And inside here, we're going to have a constructor, which is just going to run right away. And we need to call the constructor of this class that we're extending, and we do that with the super method. Okay, so we want to call that. And then we can use the this keyword to pertain to our custom element. And what I'm going to do is just insert some HTML. So we'll just set this, actually let's set this to some backticks. And for now, I'll just say John Doe. Okay, now if I save this, nothing's going to happen because all we've done is created the class. We haven't actually defined the custom element. To do that, we want to take on the window object, we have custom elements, and then we have a method called define. And this is going to take in two things. It's going to take in the name of the tag, so user card, and then the class that we want to connect it to, which is the user card class we just created. And once I save, you'll see that it outputs John Doe on the screen. Okay, so I mean that's the basics of creating a custom element. We have a custom tag, we have this class with a constructor. All we've done is set the inner HTML and we've defined it here. All right, now let's say we want to pass in an attribute like a name for each user, because obviously each user is not going to have the same name. So the way that we can access this in here, and we're not dealing with the shadow DOM or templates or anything just yet. This is just custom elements. So in here, let's go ahead and, since we use backticks, we can use a template literal. We can use this syntax, and let's say this dot get attribute. Okay, this pertaining to our custom element, and we want to get the attribute of name. And save, and now it still says John Doe. If I change it to John Does and save, we get John Does. And we can create multiple cards. So if I want to create another one here with, let's say, Jane Doe and save, now we get Jane Doe. All right, just like if you were to create a component with a framework. Now, as far as styling goes, right now, let's add a global style for what is it, H3. Did I make it an H3? No, I didn't. Let's actually make this an H3. Okay, so we just added an H3 there, and then in the global styles, I'm going to say H3 color, and we'll set this to purple and save. And notice that both H3s are purple. This H3 that's directly in the DOM, and well, I mean, this is still directly in the DOM for now, but in our custom element, our H3 is also purple. Now, what we could do is in here, we can say style, and we could set H3 color to, say, coral, and save, and it does turn coral, but so does the H3 that's outside of it. And we don't want to do that. We want to encapsulate everything into a web component. So to do that, we're going to create a shadow DOM. And the way we do that is in the constructor. Let's go right here, and we'll say this pertaining to our custom element, and then attach shadow. Okay, I showed you this in the slide. So attach shadow, and we just want to set some options with mode and set that to open. All right, now once I save that, it actually disappears because our shadow DOM, this isn't how we handle things using the shadow DOM. We need to, first of all, use our shadow root, and we're going to append child. So we're going to add into our shadow root our template, which we haven't created yet, but we will. So we're going to say template.content.clone clone node, and just pass in true here. So this returns a copy of a node. If deep is true, the copy also includes the node's descendants. So we need to create this template right here. So right now, let's just set that to nothing for now, and let's create our template, because right now it's just going to give us an error because it doesn't know what this template is. So I'm going to go above the class here, and let's say const template, and we're going to use document.createElement, which does just that. It's going to create a new element of template. Okay, and then what we'll do is take our template and set the inner HTML to whatever we want. So we'll be sure to use backticks here, and let's add in style, and let's set our H3 style color to coral. All right, now in addition to styling, we want our markup here as well. So I'm going to have a div, and I'm going to give this a class of user card because I do want to style it, somewhat nicely. So we'll have a div with user card, and then let's have our H3 here. Now remember down here I had this get attribute get attribute and then the name, right? Well, I can't do that here. Like I can't do this get attribute because it doesn't know what this is. I'm not inside the class anymore. So we're actually going to just leave this blank, and we're going to deal with it down here. So let's see. So far we have we've added the template. So now I'm going to take the shadow root, because from now on this is what we want to use to select stuff from our custom element, or from, I should say, our web component. So we're going to use query selector, and we're going to select the H3, and let's set the inner text, and then set that to what we had before, this dot get attribute, and we want the name attribute. All right, and then we don't even need to do this anymore because we're working with our template. Okay, working with our template, and we're working with our shadow DOM, shadow root. So now if I save, notice that John Doe is back on the page, and it's coral, and then this hello world is purple. Okay, so the styling that we have in our template here in our web component is only going to affect our web component. It doesn't affect the outside, and the outside doesn't affect our web component. And also, if I open up my Chrome DevTools, and let's just inspect this, so we can see the H3, and then it'll show us our user card web component with the shadow root. Okay, and inside the shadow root is our H3, we have our style tags, and then we have our div with our H3. Okay, so another thing that I would like to do is pass in an attribute for an avatar or an image. So in our user card here, because you can have as many attributes as you want, let's pass in avatar, and I'm just going to set this to, I'm going to use random user.me. So if we say random user.me slash API slash portraits slash men slash one dot JPEG, that should give us an image. So we're passing in a URL, or it could be, you know, a local image. And then what we want to do is same thing we did with name. I'm going to just grab this here, except let's see, we want query selector. We're going to select the image, and I'm not setting the inner text. I'm going to set the source to the attribute of avatar. Now it's not going to show yet because in our template we don't have an image tag. So I actually want to format this as, let's see, we're going to have a div here that wraps around, let's move this h3. So I want to have the h3 inside of a div, and let's see, above that div we're going to have an image tag. Okay, so we have our main, let me just indent this. So we have our main user card div, and then an image, and then a div with an h3. And the reason I put a div is because I'm also going to have some other stuff down here after. But let's go ahead and save this, and now you can see we have our image. Okay, if I want another user card, I could take this, copy it down, and let's change, let's see, we'll change this to portraits woman, and let's say Jane Doe. And if I save, now we have another user card component, okay, with a different avatar and a different name. Now before we do anything else here, I want to finish up our template. So that includes some styling as well as adding to our markup. So as far as the markup goes, all I want to have is under the h3, I'm going to have a div with the class of info, and inside here I basically just want to have the email and the phone number of the user. So for now, I'm just going to put in, I guess, a placeholder. We'll just say email and phone, because I'm going to show you how to use slots in a little bit. And then under that, I'm also going to have a button, because I do want to show you how we can have some interactivity. We can have events. I'm just going to have a button to basically toggle that info. So let's give this an ID of toggle info, and we'll just say, let's say hide info. So we'll add some JavaScript to change the text as well to hide and show. So if I save that, we just have, you know, our paragraphs here and then our button. Now I do want to add some styling. So I don't want to type all the CSS out, because I think, you know, that's not the focus of this course. So I'm going to just paste this in and just quickly go over it. It's not much. So basically the user card, we're just adding a font family, a gray background. We're setting the width to 500. We're going to use the grid so that the image, you can see the image is going to be one grid item, and then this whole div with everything else will be another grid item. And we're just setting it to have two columns. One is one fractional, the image, and then the text part will be bigger. It'll be two fractions. Okay, grid gap, just add some margin bottom, border bottom. The image is 100%, and then we're just styling the button, making it this dark orchid color and border radius and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and this is what it's going to look like. This is actually zoomed in. Let me put this back to 100%. Okay, now I want to show you how we can use slots to add the email and phone, or add anything we want. So within our user card here, let's just go to this first one here, and let's just put in anything. We'll just say hello. Okay, now this isn't going to show anywhere in here, but if I go to my template, and in this paragraph right here, I'm going to use slot like this. and save, and now you'll see that it says hello. Just for the first one, because that's the only one that we dealt with. In fact, let me just comment that out for now. So if you just have one thing that you want to put inside here, you can just put whatever you want and then just use slot. Now we have two things that we want to add. We want to add an email and a phone. So what we can do is inside here, instead of just putting hello or whatever, an email, we're going to add a div and we're going to give it a slot attribute. Okay, and in this slot attribute, we're going to say email. And then we'll pass in some email. Let's say johndoe@gmail.com. Now I also want to have a phone, so I'm going to copy this down, and then this is going to be our phone slot. So let's do that, and let's change this to phone. Okay, now if I save that, you'll see that it's not going to show here just yet. What we need to do is add to this slot here, we can add a name, and this is where we want to put the email, and then here this is where we want to put the phone. So now if I save, you'll see the email and phone. Okay, and then for this user card here, let's go ahead and uncomment that, and let's say we want to put inside here, I'll say Jane Doe, and I guess we'll just change this. Okay, so now we'll save, and now Jane Doe has a different email and phone number. All right, so this is all self-contained. This is all, everything is in the shadow DOM in the template. Now, the last thing that I want to show you that I want to add to this is some events, or an event. I want to be able to hide this info by clicking this button. And you can have whatever functionality you want. If you want to add some cool animations or just absolutely anything, you can put in your web component. I just wanted to give you a pretty simple example. Now, this button here has an ID of toggle info, right? So we're going to need to have an event listener on that button. And where I'm going to put that event listener is in a lifecycle method called connected callback. Remember that from the slides. It's basically called every time the element is inserted into the DOM. So under the constructor, let's say connected callback, which is kind of a weird name for it. But we're going to take the shadow root, because remember that's what we're working with here, and we're going to use the query selector. And we want to grab the ID of toggle, what is it, toggle-info, and we want to add an event listener onto that, and we're going to listen for a click, and once that happens, we'll have an arrow, and then we're going to call this dot toggle info. All right, so it's a really nice way to just encapsulate everything and have it nice and neat. So this toggle info we can create within our class. So let's actually put that right here. So toggle info, and for now, let's just do a console log 1, 2, 3 just to make sure this works. So I'm going to open up my DevTools and go to console, and if I click this, we get 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we know that that is hooked up. Now, as far as removing the event listener, we can do that in disconnected callback. So in here, let's say, I guess I'll just, we'll just copy this, and let's see, we're going to say query selector, toggle info, and then we just want to call remove event listener. Like that, so that way if it's taken out of the DOM, it'll remove that event listener. All right, now in toggle info, like I said, I want to be able to click this and basically toggle the info, also change the text of this to hide info, to show info, and so on. So I mean, there's a lot of ways we could do this. I'm actually going to set a property up here called show info, and set that to true by default because we want it to show, we want this to show by default. And then inside toggle info, we can access that. So this dot show info, and we're going to set it to whatever it's not. So this dot show info, and then let's say if if this dot show info else. Okay, so we just basically want to change the display to hidden if we don't want to show this, and we also want to change the text. So I'm going to actually grab the two elements. We have a class of info, right, which is wrapped around the email and the phone, and then of course we have our toggle info ID for the button. So let's put those in variables just to make it a little neater. So we'll say const info equals this dot shadow root. Let's actually close that up. Shadow root dot query selector, and we're going to grab the class of info. All right, and then we also want to grab the ID of toggle info, so the button, and we'll call this toggle BTN. Okay, so if this dot show info, then let's take info and just set the style of this. Whoa, info dot style dot, why is it doing that, dot display, and we want to set that to block because we're showing it. Okay, and then we also want to change the button text, so we'll take the toggle button and just set the inner text to hide info, because at this point it's showing. Display is set to block, so it's showing, so we want this to say hide info, which is its default state. And then else, let's change this to none, and let's change the text to show info. Okay, so we'll save that. We'll go over here, and if I click hide info, it hides the info. It sets it to none, right? And it also changes the text to show info. And if I click it again, it shows it. Okay, and we can of course have this one open, this one closed, and we can have as many of these user card web components as we want. All right, guys, so I mean, I know this isn't the most advanced, these aren't the most advanced web components. Obviously, we could do a lot more here, but this is a crash course. This is an introductory to web components. I'm just going to get rid of this hello world. We don't need that anymore. And we can also get rid of this style here. I just wanted to kind of show you the encapsulation of the shadow DOM. But anyways, I mean, yeah, so hopefully you learned something here. You can create your custom elements, you can pass in attributes, and you can use these slots to add content inside. You know, create your class, your template, attach the shadow DOM, append the template, and then whenever you want to reference your web component, you reference the shadow root. You can select whatever you want from the template, and just you can do whatever you want. It's just a nice way to organize everything. And of course you have these callbacks or these life cycle methods that you can use. If you wanted to fetch data, maybe you have a web component that fetches data from some kind of API or some kind of back end, you can do that in, you know, the constructor or connected callback or whatever, and you can fetch data. So I would encourage you to come up with some ideas, experiment with it, build your own stuff, your own web components, and that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.